So I am Zoe Thompson. I started my business in 2011. I used to work in the whole corporate world as a learning development consultant, and I specialize in e-learning. So big background in sort of designing all sorts of e-learning solutions for multinational companies, courses, programs, all those kinds of things. I did that for a good number of years. I qualified in hypnotherapy in 2011, and then I set up my business. I set the Refresh Minds up with 750 quid. I literally left and went, sod you, I'm off. Would I go back and do that the same way again now? Probably not. I think naivety was part of it. But on the other hand, I do think that I am proof of that you can make it work, even if that's your circumstances and even if that's what you choose to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of talk to you about my journey through it, really, and hopefully you can pick up on some of my marketing mistakes and some of the things that I did wrong. And you can therefore learn from that for your own experience and your own businesses and what you're doing. So kind of fast forward along that journey, because I will go back and speak to you about various bits of it. But I've always been helping other therapists because I love what we do. And I do think that the world has pandemics of people that are suffering with stress, anxiety, phobias, fear, confidence. I mean, the list, is endless. And yet, from a hypnotherapist point of view, or a therapist in general point of view, we seem to really struggle to make the business side of things work and sort of struggle to keep it going. And I think that's a real shame when we've got so many people out there that need us and need our help, and we can make such a positive difference in the world. That then those people that can help are the people that struggle. So I set up the Hypno Huddle, oh gosh, I don't know, time flies, probably about 6 years ago, something like that, because I wanted to get together with a group of people, like-minded people, and support those people. So I did that for a number of years, and then luckily Malcolm came along, kind of stepped up and took that over. But for years of that, people kept asking me for help when it comes to the sort of business background, the marketing, the using online technology kind of stuff. How did I create programs and talks, and how did I do videos, and how did I do blogs, and how did I kind of get everything out, and all those kinds of things. So unofficially, I've been doing that for years. And then last year, just before the pandemic, I finally kind of got my butt in gear after thinking about this idea for 3 years. I made it official. So Build It Brilliant launched last year, just before the pandemic. And I thought it was going to be kind of a soft launch. And then the pandemic hit, and everyone was like, Zoe, can you show me how to use Zoom? Can you show me how to do this online stuff? And what I thought was going to be quiet kind of ended up a bit crazy. So anyway, here we are. And tonight, really, what I wanted to do was kind of use my story and my journey to teach you some of the things that I did wrong along the way, but also find out from you guys what's the things that you struggle with in terms of marketing and getting yourself out there within your practice. So if you want to, I'm just wondering, in terms of time, let's do it in chat. So if you bring up your chat box and type in there kind of what's the things that hold you back, or what's the things that you struggle with, and then as I'm going through this, I can make sure that I'm pinpointing those things and answering those things. So if there's anything that you could learn by the end of tonight and take away with you that's going to help, what would it be? What you're struggling with? It's a good one, James. I can certainly do that. Malcolm, in terms of videos, is that subject matter, or is that the actual physicality of doing videos? I'm presuming for you that it's subject matter, because
Well, no, actually, a bit of both.
Both?
Struggling more. I can do it, the technology-wise, but I always think there must be an easier way.
Yeah.
And video is king at the moment of content. Yeah, anytime I've done anything, it just seems to eat so much time to produce something that you end up getting sort of 10, 20, 30 views.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you've got any hints or tips to make that a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Some good stuff here. Oh, love it. Okay. So some of this will definitely come out in my journey. So when I started in 2011, I started off as the wedding karma, actually. And I went out helping people in the wedding world with things like losing weight, confidence to walk down the aisle, speech nerves, those sorts of things. And what do I think I did well with that? I think some of the stuff that I did well with that was I looked to see kind of where I could apply my skill with my NLP coaching, hypnotherapy. I looked out to the world and said, okay, where can I apply that, which is actually in need and something that people want? So I think that's a tip in terms of marketing, because you'll learn a bit later on how that went a bit astray in the middle. But I think I did that really well. What happened was I started going to wedding fairs. I started getting to know kind of people in the wedding industry, kind of putting myself out with those people. And it took me 6 months to get one client. And within 18 months, I think I'd had 3. So the reason that I think that was a struggle, and one of the lessons that I took away from that, was I'd done the classic of what most people do, and that is to look out to the world and say, what is everyone else doing? And everyone else was doing one-to-one services, 60 quid an hour. So I was like, well, they almost know what they're doing. So I did one-to-one services, 60 quid an hour. Do you want help with weight loss, confidence, speaking nerves, those kinds of things? The reason that didn't work, and the reason why I ended up kind of packing it in, is because one of the biggest mistakes that I made was not really getting into my clients' shoes. People who are organizing weddings are short on 2 things. One is time and one is money. And the solution that I'd created needed time and it needed money. So that for me is the biggest lesson that I learned out of that. I think the other lesson was I invested quite a lot of money in that idea. And if I was to go back and do that again, there's a few things I'd do differently. Number one is I would test that market. So if you're thinking about doing something or doing something new, I would do it small scale, test it and see if it works. And I absolutely didn't that. I had excitement in abundance. I wanted to get in there. I wanted to help. And I spent a hell of a lot of money on an idea that really wasn't formulated and really wasn't kind of rigid. So I would definitely, if you're looking at doing something, I would start small, test it, and get that flow working first with a small amount of money, and then you can scale it up to something bigger. So that's definitely one. I think the other thing is, if you are looking at your customer and really truly putting yourself in your customer's shoes, what product would I have created? And actually, if I go back now, I would have used my e-learning skills and come up with ready-made packages that they could have bought. Because in a wedding fair, they would happily have paid me, a lesser amount of money for a hypnotherapy package that was already packaged up, that they could just go home and use, gift to their parent, gift to their brother, gift to the bride, those sorts of things. So I think the second lesson for me is, how are you packaging your services for your market? And have you stepped into those customer shoes and really thought about, how can I create this in a way that's really going to work? So after 18 months, I decided this isn't working. And obviously 3 clients isn't going to keep a roof over my head. So I changed. So once again, what did I do? I looked out to everybody else, thought that everyone else had the right idea, and went, okay, I'm going to market myself as Zoe the hypnotherapist. So I completely changed and went out as Zoe the hypnotherapist. My website became the very traditional hypnotherapy website that you see, with all the different services listed for I can help with fears, phobias, weight loss, smoking, you know, all the kind of list of hypnotherapy things. And I went out with that. I think on one hand, something that I learned was more about how to put that out there. So I think the hypnotherapy stuff, the website was certainly better than I had. It was a lot clearer over what I was offering. So that was something I did learn. By this point, I was blogging regularly. So I was blogging on a weekly basis, and I was doing really, really well in terms of the blogging side of things, of then using that blog on different socials. So I would put that on my website, and then I would share it on a media, like my social medias. I would tell people what the upcoming topic was going to be. That side of things I was really, really good at. And I think one of the lessons that I learned at this point is what you do in terms of marketing. I kind of had this idea that I was going to open my door and then people were going to flood and want my services. And it's crazy. It doesn't work like that at all. I read a piece of research that said that people need to see you, connect with you, or do something with you at least 8 times before they even feel comfortable to have a proper conversation with you. So the amount of things that you have to kind of put out there is far bigger and far more than what you think it is. And people, that know, like, and trust factor takes time to grow. So one of the mistakes that I made at that point was I got really disheartened and gave up because I was like putting all this effort in, doing all this blogging, doing all this stuff, and was just like getting few people. So I was like, I'm sick of that. So I think from that, I just had this idea, and an incorrect idea, that you put something out there, people read it, they like you, and then they book with you, which is completely unrealistic in terms of the world of marketing. Facebook alone, if you post something on a Facebook page, it's probably only going to show to about 10% of your audience. So the likelihood that they're going to see something that you say, I'm a hypnotherapist, I can help you with a phobia, would you like me to help? And they're immediately going to book an appointment with you is illogical in terms of marketing. That's not how it works. So the things that I did badly with that, and it comes back to one of the points that you've made, is about limited budget. I've always had a limited budget. My budget has always been small. I think one of the sort of the mistakes that I made at that point was going out to too many people with too many things. Now, that doesn't mean that you as a business have to niche, but your marketing has to niche. So if you're going out and you're talking to somebody about sleeping, just putting one post saying I can help you with sleeping, or just putting one advert out saying I can help you with sleeping, is not going to get you very far. And what I was doing is taking that small budget and then putting it into adverts about different things, blogging about different topics. And it was what I now refer to as a splattergun approach. I was just going to all these different people, and I had no traction with any of them, because there was no I start you at this point and I'm going to take you through to this point. There was no coherence. It was like, what's Zoe going to talk about this week, and what's she going to give free this week? Like, there was no actual, kind of relationship building with a certain audience for a certain topic, and getting people to know that you're an expert in that particular thing, because I was just doing too many things in too many places, too many different topics and too many different audiences. And with a small budget, it goes nowhere. It just gets absorbed, and you can just keep feeding it and feeding it and feeding it, and it still doesn't really get you traction. So I then started going, okay, hang on. What about me? I ended up seeing a lot of clients. So at this point, I was probably seeing 15, 20 clients a week. I was absolutely exhausted with that amount of one-to-one clients. I wasn't loving it. I realized that there isn't enough time in my week to market and do a business for the amount of clients that I actually need in order to make the money. So I was really, really busy, but still my bank balance wasn't healthy. And I was absolutely exhausted. So at that point, I came back to myself and I said, right, hang on. Any business that you build has to start with you. How many hours do you want to work? How much money do you want to make? And realizing that you cannot sustain that level of client work in that and actually run a business. So I generally say it's about half. So half of your time with client hours to half of your time on business stuff, whether that be books, marketing, networking, whatever it is that you decide to do. But your money has to work. So you have to look at that half in terms of your hours and say, right, can I, in those half, make the money that I want to earn in order for me to be happy and healthy and all those kinds of things? I was absolutely exhausted. So I came back again and started saying, okay, I need to pick some things that I'm really good at, that I can go out to people and I can really help with. And my answer was stress, anxiety, and chronic pain. Those things are things that I passionately really love. They're things that I have a history with stress-related illness and anxiety, so I can talk about that story. It's something that when clients came to me with those kinds of things, I really enjoyed working with them. And I slashed my client hours in half. So I said, I'm only having this many clients, but I upped my prices. So I said, here's my package price for this many sessions, because that works within that. If people are coming to me with those kinds of things, they want a certain, I'll work with you for so long, and then I want a solution, I want an outcome at that amount. So I decided to go package pricing, higher pricing, less client hours. And that gave me the time to then be able to do the business. The other thing that I'd forgotten was I was in the learning and development world and the corporate world for so long that I know those people. So not only did I say I'm working on stress, anxiety, and chronic pain, I said for the professionals. So I went out to the corporate world, corporate professionals. I did professional workshops and I did one-to-one services, but all to the same people. So suddenly those decisions, like you're saying about, what's the video content that I create, or what's the starting point for my adverts, or what pricing, or how do I get the most out of the money? Suddenly all of those things became very obvious because I had the strategy behind it. So which social media platform am I going to use? LinkedIn, because I'm going out to a professional audience. What is my messaging? I'm going to talk about stress. I'm going to talk about anxiety, and I'm going to talk about the link between stress, anxiety, and chronic pain. That's what I'm going to talk about. And every blog was about that. And every video was about that. And every conversation that I had was about that. And then if somebody asked me, my story was telling people about stress that I'd experienced and chronic pain that I'd experienced. And suddenly my very small budget was going into a consistent thing. And yes, I was using different ways of getting that message out there, but the messaging was all the same, and it was all going to corporate professionals. And in terms of time, I got some corporate workshops. They're really good for money wise, budget wise, they're really, really good. And I had package prices for my one-to-one clients. And once my hours in my week were full, I said, I'm full. And that was a really hard step for me to actually say, that person that rings up who's really struggling, who says, oh, but can you just squeeze it in? You end up going, oh yeah, go on, and adding on the evening, adding on the Saturday morning, adding on. And I was like, I'm full. And actually what that did is more people wanted to speak to me and wanted to work with me because I was full. And I had a waiting list, which I was like, this is bonkers. So actually, I ended up with less people paying me more money and more people wanting to work with me through that strategy. So in terms of some of the questions that you've asked, starting points for adverts, I think the reason when you say I'm struggling with a point or a theme, I think it's because you're probably trying to do too many different things. Would that be fair? Yeah. So you could choose to do something that you stick to one topic for a certain amount of time. So like I said, your business doesn't necessarily have to niche. You can still be a hypnotherapy that does all of these things if you want to. But I would say do 3 months, even 6 months, and just nail one thing. Do an advert for that. The other thing in the book that I talk about is structure, and saying that you need something at the bottom to get people in. So online conversion rates are 1%, and that is exactly the same no matter who you are. Like, I've been to events of people who are billionaires, they still convert online at 1%. So another thing that I did was I did workshops, and then I'd have like 2 people turn up, and then I think the whole idea was a bad idea, jack it in and not do it ever again. But what I look at now is actually my numbers were really good, but I wasn't talking to enough people to convert at 1%. So if you're doing an event and you want 10 people, that 10 people needs to be 1% of the people that you get interested in that event to make those numbers work. And that's not you being rubbish, or your marketing being rubbish, or your messaging being rubbish. That's just industry fact. So potentially, I think with that one, number one is you're trying to go out to too many things, not specific things. You're potentially not doing it for long enough. So you might go out with an advert that's about one thing and then switch to something else, in which case it's that customer journey issue that you've not quite got people getting on board with you and taking that journey with you and really getting to know you and like you and trust you. And I think potentially you might not be going out to enough people if you're struggling with your adverts. Because the numbers on Facebook and things like that say, oh, it's gone out for 3,000 people. And it's like, oh, well, in that case, it's gone out to loads of people. But it's like, how many people have clicked? And is that 1% of the people that I need? So I think there's some ideas there. Yeah, awful. It's awful, isn't it? Facebook. I just think the world of advertising is horrible. It's not service related at all. And that's one of the reasons that I set up Build It Brilliant, is because we can have a service industry and talk to people in a service way and market ourselves really well. We don't have to fall into this desperate, horrible advertising that's going out of, you know, come to me and I'll solve all your problems in a week, or I don't know, it's just icky, it's just horrible. So I think it's come back to your personality. And if there's anything over the last year that I've learned, it's personality, and suddenly saying, like, putting my part of me out there in my social media and what I'm doing, and kind of sticking to who I am and the way that I put that across, and not being ashamed of that, but saying, this is my uniqueness, this is my authenticity, this is my relevancy. And yes, there's a load of people that went, I don't like that, but it kind of gave me permission to get the people that would fit me by getting rid of the people that don't. So I think don't be afraid of doing it your way and putting yourself out there and your voice out there, and not falling into all of this awful advertising. If you think it's awful, other people think it's awful. So do it your way, and you'd be surprised when you give yourself permission to do it, how good it could be. Hypnotherapy being valuable, I think that's a really interesting one. I think it's changing slowly but surely. I think more people are getting the idea, but again, I think it comes back to that 8 times. People have to hear you, see you, get to know you. And I think what happens is you kind of put that message out once and then say, right, I've done that now. The likelihood is about 10% of your audience have seen that. So we need to put that out again, share it again, slice it another way, come up with a Canva image again, share an article about it again. I've been working quite closely with a lady who's built her business for 10 years, and she talks about chronic pain in a certain way, and it's quite difficult for people to get their head around in terms of it not being a medical model. And she's been saying the same thing about chronic pain for 10 years. It takes so long to get people on board and to change their beliefs and to educate them and to give them information. Don't give up on it. there's more than you doing it. There's a whole world of people talking about hypnotherapy, but just keep saying it and saying it and saying it and sharing it and sharing it and sharing it and sharing it. And even when you get bored to the back teeth of sharing it, carry on sharing it, because people will not have seen it. You can say it 20 times and then somebody goes, oh, you said such a thing. And you're like, yes, for the 50th of time. How have you not seen that on my social media? How have you not seen that in what I've said? Like, just keep saying it. People, you won't bore people. People will not care. They won't have seen your 50th message. ASA, Advertising Standards Agency, is a really, really interesting one. The lady that I was talking about had quite a run-in with the Advertising Standards Agency, so I've got personal experience of dealing with them. It's a really interesting one because there's certain ways of putting some, I think the heart of the Advertising Standards Agency comes from the right place. Ultimately, they're there to stop people getting ripped off. And once upon a time, I don't know if you saw them, but there were horrible adverts, especially there may still be, from hypnotherapy saying that they can cure you of this and cure you of that, and you know, promising that you would be free in a week, or one session cures, and all these kinds of things. So I think the heart of the ASA is in the right place, and that is proper information about proper things in the proper way. And I think if you go out in that right way, it's very unlikely that the ASA are going to come at you. The reason why this particular lady, because in some of her messaging she had the word recovery and they just didn't like that word, so she's changed it to regain your life. So there's ways in which you can change that language just to soften it a little bit. They tend to not like cure, recovery. You know, they don't like anything that puts us within the medical model, and you don't want to be in that world either, because actually if you fall under the medical model for the Advertising Standards Agency, you're in the realm of pharmaceuticals and all the red tape that they have to go through and all of that, and all sorts of stuff. So actually we don't want to fall into that world, because it would prevent us from going forwards. But there are certain ways that you can just tweak that language. So I think just soften it a little bit and do it from the correct place in the right way, and you shouldn't be too bad. And in terms of social media, I've had quite a few people recently saying that they don't want to use social media and coming away from social media as an option because of the juxtaposition, I guess, that if you're working with people on mental health or stress or anxiety or whatever, and one of the biggest toxic things is social media, and then you're using social media to kind of get those people, and I've had quite a few people saying that they just don't like that and they just want to come away from it. My response to that is there was a hell of a lot of successful companies before social media existed. So there is nothing to say that you cannot be successful without using social media. I think you just have to be a little bit more creative. You have to be a little bit more thoughtful over how are you gonna get your message out there? How are you going to talk to people? And it doesn't mean that you can't do it. I think you just need to go back to your strategy and think, okay, who am I talking to? Where can I find them? You know, and how can I get them into your email list or onto your website? You know, networking events, doing talks, speaking events, those sorts of things can be really good. You can absolutely do it. I mean, good old snail mail and getting something out in the post, that would surprise people these days because we just don't get it. So, you know, there's loads and loads of ways that you can do things without social media, but I do think you just have to be a little bit more thoughtful and creative in your strategy and what you want to do. And in terms of can you get guidance? Yes, the ASA are actually really helpful and they were really lovely. So when we contacted them after they'd sort of kicked up a fuss, when we contacted them, they were actually really nice. And there was one particular person who we said, what about this? What about that? Can we change this? Is it here? What's there? What can we do? How can we do it? And they helped us through all of it. And eventually we came up with something that worked. So they're not there to be nasty, bad people who are evil and stopping you doing what you're doing. They will absolutely help you. if you need it. But the likelihood is the only reason why they came under the ASA was somebody complained and said they're using this word and it's so really the likelihood is the ASA have got a hell of a lot to do and huge big businesses to sort out. So unless somebody actually goes out and complains about you, the likelihood is that you're never really going to have to deal with them anyway. But if you do, they are genuinely lovely and helpful. Experience with Google AdWords. I'll take this as the last one, and then we'll sort of open up for Q&A and move on. But Malcolm's got some social media stuff as well. Do I have any experience with Google AdWords? Yes and no. Budget sapping is the answer of Google AdWords. If you have the budget, then go for it. But budget sapping, I much rather go in the SEO route. It is small, it is slower to get there in terms of SEO and getting your keywords on there and getting that all sorted and getting in there. It will take longer to build and it will be slower. You can pay to be on the first page of Google. I know some hypnotherapists have done that. Again, I think you need your strategy to be very clear. What are you AdWording for? And make sure that that is who you want and crystal clear over what you want, because first page on Google for a search word and you've paid amount of money to do that, are people searching for that word? And are those the people that you want? And is that worth the investment for what you're paying? So I do have some experience with AdWords. And again, I think you need a clear strategy if you're going to invest that budget in that option. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Zoe. And yeah, and I'll run through just a few interesting facts and figures on social media, and then we can perhaps have an open discussion. But just on AdWords, it's sort of one of the first things I did when I set up. And actually, you get like free credit, you know, when you set something up, and so it wasn't as much money as
Free?
but I got quite a flurry of calls straight away. I was so impressed. Until I realized everybody was phoning or emailing asking me for nicotine patches. And I'm not quite sure why. They'd obviously Googled nicotine patches. Somehow stopping smoking had been picked up on that. People didn't read it, seen a phone number, phoned it, asking for nicotine patches. If I had nicotine patches to sell, I would have made a fortune. So it was a very odd, Google AdWords, just be careful with it, I think. And you will have things like that. But I did get some success out of it, but it's a hell of a confusing. So you get your head around it first if you can, and use the free credit that comes with it. So I'm going to quickly share my screen, because I do like a presentation. And I did a presentation on this about this time last year as well, and much more in depth than this. This is going to be a very whiz-bang run through on social media last year. Went into a bit more depth, but I kind of revisited a bit of it just to see how the pandemic had impacted it, and it was quite surprising. I quite like facts and figures, but just for a bit of background, people still talk about social media like it's a new thing, and I do this as well. When I started off in PR and communications, it was in the year 2000, you know, way before, you know, it was Friendster. I don't remember that. MySpace, I do remember. But then Facebook was 2004, Twitter 2006, and so on. So in the grand scheme of things, relatively new if you're of a certain age. For other age groups, these have been around forever. You know, these have always been around. So there is a bit of a disconnect about how you perceive social media, but it certainly shows that, you know, it's not going anywhere. And this is for the past year. The number of users, quite, you know, 4.5 billion active social media users, not necessarily individual people, but people who can have multiple accounts. But that number is staggering. But what really surprised me is it's gone up in the past year. I thought perhaps there would have been more of a move away from it. You certainly hear people saying that they don't use it as much, or they don't like it, and it is quite a toxic environment, and they're not going to use it as much. But the numbers are still going up all the time. And almost all people are accessing it on their mobile phones. Again, when it's first started back in the 2000s, it was all done via desktop. Phones couldn't connect to the internet at that point. Now that's how everyone does access it. It's on their phone. That's a good point as well for when you're thinking about websites or anything that you're doing. It might look fantastic on a desktop. Most people aren't looking at anything online on their desktop anymore. It needs to also look fantastic and work well on a mobile and a tablet as well, much more so than a desktop. And it's over 2 hours people are spending each day on social media. It's a significant amount of time being spent on there. I think it's got its pros and it's got its cons, social media. I've dealt with it a lot through a variety of different roles that I've been involved in, and I've seen the positive effects. I've also seen the negative effects. But I think the key thing is, I think you need to actively choose not to use it. And I think, Lorraine, you were mentioning that there as well. But it is a huge part of what other people will be doing. And as Zoe said, then you need to think creatively about how you're going to be engaging with an audience, because this is how the majority of people will probably be looking to engage. And it has got its pros and cons. But Facebook, the biggest one of all, almost 3 billion monthly users. Going back to what Zoe was saying about LinkedIn, but also 75% of high income earners use Facebook. So those professionals are on there almost an hour a day. And then the typical, the most active age groups, 35 to 44, will give the most likes, 45 to 54, most comments. If you're going to do a video, keep between 2 and 5 minutes as well. The ones I always love is the best times to post. And I never quite believed this until I started trying it. And actually, if you do post at these times, you will get higher engagement. Between 1 and 3 p.m. during the week and Saturdays for Facebook, you can get much more detail on that. Quick Google will give you, what's the best time specifically in the UK, and it'll break it down Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it does vary slightly. But certainly, there are times like early afternoon that just work better. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I will post them on the group as well. But just a few of the interesting ones. Going back again to what Zoe said, I think you said 10%. 10% of people you thought who like your page will see what you post. It's 5.2% according to this. So minimal amount of people, and that's people who like your page, and then you post something. So I don't know how many likes people have got on their Facebook pages if they have Facebook pages, but I know most hypnotherapists' Facebook pages that I like, because we support one another, is a couple of hundred. Looking at 10 people, not much. So it does take a lot of work. But if you're going to share something, images posted are the most shared compared to other post types. So always try and think in the images and have an image to go with. But 2.14 billion people reach through adverts on Facebook. Quite staggering. Majority of them are male, interesting. And randomly, the ideal Facebook ad title has a maximum of 4 words. That works best. Instagram, the next biggest, 1.15 billion users. Certainly a younger demographic, 18 to 24 is the larger demographic on Instagram. So if you're looking for a younger audience, then Instagram is where you need to be. Have a hashtag on Instagram. Posts with at least one hashtag average 12.6 more engagement. And the more unlike other social media, the more hashtags on Instagram, the better. On Facebook and Twitter, try and keep it to 2 or 3. Weekdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays have the most engagement, and a few other ones. But interestingly here, 90% of accounts follow at least one business on Instagram. There's a feeling, I think, of almost, people don't want to engage with brands or businesses on their social media. And all the numbers show that's not the case, actually. People are quite happy to engage with brands that they connect with. And most people actually do follow a brand. Twitter's far fewer users. I think Twitter gets a lot of the attention, but it's actually got a lot less, but probably more influential in many ways. And people who are active tweeters, the top 10%, actually contribute 92% of all the tweets. That's in the US, but it's probably similar here. And then the age ranges, again, this is specifically for ad audiences, are skewing a bit younger. But companies especially are very active on Twitter. Quite a lot of them use it for customer service. You've probably seen a lot of that in recent years. That's growing and growing. Most companies tweet at least once a day. 93% of people who follow a brand, though, plan to buy from them. So if they're following you, they've got an engagement with you and they've got a plan to buy from you. Now, this is from marketing, from, I don't know, Coca-Cola or Nike or whatever, but this still works for us as a much smaller scale. If someone's following you, then they've got an engagement, and actually buying from you is something they will certainly consider. Tweets with a GIF or a GIF, however you like to say it, gain 55% more engagement than those without. I did not know this till I was pulling this together. I'm going to have a GIF on all my posts now, because it's quite staggering how much more engagement you get on that. And I've just pulled out then some of the ones I actually think relate more directly to what we might be posting on this final slide here. And again, it's some hints and tips. So if you are thinking about doing a video, make sure it is between 2 and 5 minutes, because it's been shown to get better engagement. If you are going to post, actually try it in the times it says to see if it does make a difference. If you're doing an ad, don't go over 4 words, because that's been shown again, time and time again, to actually have higher levels of engagement. So I think all these points have been demonstrated through so much research has gone into it, so much time, so much effort. Let's use it actually, and let's make sure that we're following kind of the best practice for social media if you are using it. And again, if you're not using it, then I think, as Zoe says, we need to think about how to be creative. But there is a huge, massive, mammoth audience that are there that we can connect with. It's going to be difficult. There's no quick fixes to engaging with it, but there is a channel out there, or multiple channels, which, with a bit of work and a bit of getting to know how it works, then you can reach. I think you can reach the audiences quickly and relatively inexpensively as well. So that was a very quick overview, and I think quite interesting just to see where we are at the moment with social media continuing to grow. And then, yeah, I think to open it up for general discussion.